My name is Vincenzo, and I'm a former gangster. Not the kind they show in movies with elegant outfits and romance, but from real life. I sat in the back seat of a car while my buddy settled things with some guy right in the parking lot near a trattoria. I raised toasts at weddings where the groom had an extremely grim past, and the best men were cops who saw everything but preferred to keep their mouths shut. I said goodbye to comrades whom law enforcement didn't even bother to search for. Now I live in a modest cottage in Wyoming. No one knows about my past. I plant vegetables, walk the dog, and sip cheap coffee at the local diner. But every night I expect to see an old dark Ford with tinted windows slowly driving past my home. People like that don't forget, ever. I was born in New Jersey, in Newark. If you're from America, you know. It's an area where the aroma of Italian cuisine mixes with exhaust fumes and the salty wind from the ocean. My father worked at the harbor, my mother waited tables at a cafe. Money was barely enough. We wore our shoes until they were completely worn out. In our neighborhood, there were two types of kids, those who dreamed of escaping from here and those who had already given up. But there were always influential figures, guys in fancy suits who occupied corner tables in establishments, handed out $100 tips, and drove Lincolns. Everyone guessed who they were, but no one said it out loud. At 15, my buddy Mikey suggested, "Vince, wanna make some money? Easy job." My task was to hang out on the corner and signal if the cops showed up. Back then, I didn't get what the guys were really doing. It was just a gig for me. But when they handed me $100 for 20 minutes, I realized this was totally different money from what my dad made in a whole week. Then I became a courier. Envelopes, bags, packages. They always told me, "Don't be curious," and I wasn't. One day, the owner of the pub, where I delivered an envelope, poured me a soda and said, "Remember, kid, solid people respect the loyal ones." I etched those words into my mind for life. By 16, I had new sneakers, Wrangler jeans, and a Timex watch. In school, I was known as the cool dude. Teachers asked, "Vincenzo, where do you work part-time?" I grinned, helping at a trattoria. But in reality, I was already transporting cash from illegal gambling. There was tobacco smoke, cheap bourbon, and people who never smiled without a reason. One of the influentials, Carmen, once patted me on the shoulder. "You're doing great. You have a career ahead." For the first time, I felt pride that I'd been noticed. But this world wasn't just about money. I'll never forget the night when Mikey and I were hanging out in the pub's basement and heard a crash upstairs. I wanted to go up, but he grabbed my arm. "Freeze, don't get involved." A couple of minutes later, it went quiet. Carmen came down looking unruffled, as if nothing happened. He looked at us and said, "Boys, remember, in our world, silence is worth more than diamonds." And that's when I first realized this is no game. Questions from Reddit. Did you feel fear in your youth? Every day, but in that reality, fear was like the air. It surrounded you constantly. If you showed it, you were dead. I learned to grin even when my heart was pounding so hard I wanted to run. Why didn't you bail back then? Because of the money, the respect, and the feeling that you're part of something huge. It's like a drug. You don't realize you're stuck, and at 17, you think you're immortal. My first serious assignment involved a conversation. Some guy was overdue on a big sum to the clan. 3 of us, me, Mikey, and an older guy named Vinny, were sent to refresh his memory. We showed up at his auto shop. Vinny grinned, spoke softly. "Hey, we're friends, right? But a debt's a debt. You owe the clan." The guy mumbled, promised he'd pay soon. Then Vinny grabbed a wrench and smashed it into the hood of a car. "See, next time it won't be metal that gets hurt." I stood off to the side and for the first time felt like we were in deep. But when we left, Vinny slipped me $20 and said, "You're a champ, didn't crack." I walked home thinking this is wrong, but inside it echoed, now I'm one of them. When you're 17 with more cash in your pocket than your parents see in a month, you feel like a king. I could walk into any trattoria and bartenders knew my name. I could spend the evening in a pub and even grown men raised a glass to me. But with that came responsibility. The people giving me money weren't philanthropists. Every bill implied an obligation, and one day I realized I'm in this world up to my neck. At first it was small stuff. Deliver an envelope, drop off a package, pass a message. Then came harder missions. For example, head to a nearby town, pick up a person, and bring them back. Sounds simple, right? But only if you don't know that this guy owed the clan a hefty sum and the meeting could turn into anything. That's when I first realized, even a simple drive could end with you not making it home. One evening, Vinny, Mikey, and I showed up at a small shop. The owner was late on payment. Vinny spoke evenly, almost friendly, but the owner tried to argue. Vinny sighed, approached the counter, and slammed his fist into it. The glass cracked. "See, pal, things break in an instant, but we don't want anything breaking on you, so be smart." The owner got the hint immediately. That's when I first saw that in this world, words matter as much as actions, sometimes more. Questions from Reddit. Were there moments when you were truly scared? Constantly, even in quiet times. Fear was part of the routine. You walk down the street and you're already looking over your shoulder, sit in a pub and wonder who's watching you. What was the most key thing you learned in your youth? That you can only rely on those who are in the mud with you. The rest smile as long as it suits them. I was often sent to Carmine. He was the guy everyone respected. He could sit in a cafe, sip cappuccino, chat about football, and the whole crew would gather around him like he was magnetic. One day he told me, "Vincenzo, remember, in our business the main thing is loyalty. Money comes and goes, power is here today, gone tomorrow, but if people know they can count on you, you'll stay afloat." Those words became my axiom. I wasn't the strongest, not the smartest, but I was loyal. 18 years old. They gave me a mission, drive a car to Queens. Nothing extraordinary, they said. I got behind the wheel, but as soon as I hit the highway, my soul sank to my heels. The car was someone else's. I knew something was hidden in the trunk. I didn't ask, but I was sure it wasn't just wrenches. Every traffic light felt like a trap. Every cop car passing by, a verdict. When I finally handed over the keys to Carmine, he stared at me and grinned. "See, kid, now you've stepped up." I realized there's no turning back. My first grand event was a wedding. Not mine, of course, I was just a guest, but it was a clan wedding. There was everything, fancy outfits, music, dancing, champagne, but mainly the atmosphere. In the hall sat guys you wouldn't see side by side in normal life. Politicians, businessmen, neighborhood folks, all together, all grinning like old pals. I sat at the table and realized, this isn't just a celebration, it's a show of power. Every toast was not about love, but about loyalty. Every gift, a reminder of debts. Where there's money and influence, there's always betrayal. In our neighborhood, there was a guy named Gino. He'd been with us since childhood, but decided to play both sides. First, we noticed the cash didn't add up. Then rumors spread that he was talking to outsiders. Vinny once told me, "See, Vincenzo, in our world, the main thing is to shut up and be loyal. Break one of those and you're gone." I don't know what happened to Gino. I just never saw him again. Questions from Reddit. Did you ever regret getting involved? Yes, but by then I knew you can't just slip out. You're either in or out forever. What was the most stressful episode at that stage? The first drive with the trunk. I thought my heart would burst. But those moments show if you're ready to continue. By 20, I wasn't just a kid on errands anymore. I was a link in the chain. People knew my name. I could walk into a pub, and grown men who'd ignored me yesterday nodded. But with that came the feeling, I'm sinking deeper. Every day I woke up thinking, what if today is the last? And one day I realized, my life isn't mine anymore, it's the clan's. The first big assignment. I turned 21 when Carmine called me to him. We sat in his favorite cafe. He sipped cappuccino while I nervously twisted a glass of water. "Vincenzo," he said, "time to test you for real." The mission sounded simple. Go to a nearby town, pick up goods, and make sure they get to the destination. I nodded, though inside everything clenched. I already knew these things are rarely easy. That night we drove in a convoy, 3 cars, a couple in each. Outside, ordinary guys in suits, but tension hung even through the closed windows. Every turn felt like a test, every oncoming truck a threat. We delivered the goods, everything went smooth. But that evening I realized, now I'm not just a kid on errands. Now I'm a player in the big game. From then on, totally different sums flooded into my life. I wasn't carrying pocket change anymore. Now I had stacks of bills. I could afford a car, a real one shiny with leather seats. I could walk into an establishment and tip as much as my mother earned in a shift. But with the money came a new reality. I couldn't just wander the neighborhood anymore. I couldn't hang in a pub without looking around. Respect had a price, and you paid it daily. I first noticed guys in suits outside our pub. They didn't come in, just hung on the corner and watched. A couple days later, they showed up again, but in a different spot. Vinny said, "See, Vince, that's the FBI. They're always around, smile at them. They already know who we are." I pretended not to notice, but inside it boiled. I realized our world isn't just us and our rules. Somewhere nearby are guys methodically piecing together the puzzle. Questions from Reddit. Did you know you were being watched? Yes, we all knew. Sometimes they even showed up on purpose, like a reminder they're here. It was psychological pressure. Were you afraid of the FBI? More than anyone, because from our own, you at least predict what to expect. The FBI could dismantle everything in a day. I remember a dinner at an Italian place in Jersey. Huge table, all the clan guys, laughter, talks. Suddenly, two in suits walked in, sat at a separate table, ordered coffee. We all guessed who they were. They sat, grinned, pretended to enjoy the food, and we pretended they didn't exist. Carmen just quietly said, "Let them watch, let them see we're not shaking." But I felt it. Every glance was like a stab in the back. I started thinking, what's next? Yeah, I had money. Yeah, I felt respect, but it all stood on quicksand. Every night I fell asleep thinking, what if the FBI picks me up tomorrow? Or worse, what if my own think I'm unreliable? The clan gave me everything, but it could take my life and freedom in an instant. One day, Carmen called me. "Vincenzo," he said sternly, "you must remember we have no compromises. If you're into the end. If you doubt, you're already lost." Those words stuck. I nodded, though inside everything screamed. I knew I was already doubting. The story with the comrade. A guy from a nearby neighborhood decided he could serve two bosses. He started leaking info to the FBI. One evening, he just vanished. No one asked, no one mentioned his name. I sat thinking, that's the fate. One wrong step and you're erased. Questions from Reddit. Did it feel like there was no way out? Constantly, I was like in a cage, only a golden one. Everything shines, but you're still a prisoner. Why didn't you stop? Because leaving meant signing your own sentence. The only exit was feet first. My mother didn't know what I was up to, or rather, she suspected but stayed silent. One day, she looked at me and said, "Vincenzo, I'm glad you have everything now, but sometimes I feel like I'm losing you." I smiled and replied, "Mom, everything's fine." But inside I felt, she's right. I wasn't the kid running around the neighborhood with a ball anymore. I'd become part of a world with no way back. By 23, I already knew. My future is either prison or the grave. But I kept going, because at that moment I simply had no alternative. Big money, big risks. By 25, I had a life many dreamed of. Car with leather interior, custom suits, watches worth thousands. I walked into places, and bartenders set up the best table right away. But behind every smile was calculation. Behind every glass of wine, a reminder that tomorrow might not come. At that time, we had serious operations. No more small errands and trips. Now I saw the clan's real inner kitchen. Contracts, negotiations, territory divisions. One time, we were sent to a meeting in an old motel on the outskirts of New York. Outside, it looked like it would collapse from a gust of wind. We entered the room. Inside were two guys, outsiders, grinning, shaking hands, but tension hung in the air. The talk was about money, big money. I sat in the corner, silent, listening, and suddenly realized one wrong word, and this room becomes someone's final one. Luckily, it ended with handshakes and verbal oaths. But as we drove back, I felt for the first time, we're balancing on the edge. One move and your whole life crumbles. Questions from Reddit. What was the most stressful in such meetings? That no one spoke directly, every word had subtext. A smile could mean friendship or a threat. Did you ever see such negotiations end badly? I can't talk about it openly, but let's say, some who sat at the table never showed up to meetings again. The more money spun in the clan, the more I noticed guys in suits. They hung around pubs, parking lots, near places. Sometimes just standing and smoking, sometimes coming in and sitting at the next table. One morning, a guy in a fancy coat approached me. "Vincenzo," he said, "you're a smart kid. You know where this leads." I pretended not to understand and walked past, but inside everything vibrated. I realized they're targeting me personally. Soon I was called to the station, formally as a witness. In the room were two agents. They grinned like we were old buddies. "Vincenzo," one said, "we know who you are, we know what you do. You still have a chance. Just cooperate and we'll help you." I smiled and responded, "Gentlemen, I'm just a guy who works part-time at a trattoria." They exchanged glances. One said, "You're wasting time. We won't forget this conversation." When I left the station, it felt like I had a target on my back. I told Vinny everything. He looked at me sternly. "Remember, Vince, the FBI is like a shadow. They're always nearby, but if they find out you talk to them too long, you're done." I nodded, but inside I knew I was between two fires. At one of the dinners, Carmine raised a glass and said, "In our world, the main thing is loyalty. Everything else can be bought or taken, but without loyalty, you have nothing." I felt his gaze linger on me. Maybe coincidence, or maybe he already knew the FBI tried to talk to me. Questions from Reddit. Did you ever think about making a deal with the FBI? I did. Any sane person thinks about saving themselves, but the price was too high. In our world, you pay for such thoughts quickly and without chatter. How did you cope with this pressure? Honestly, booze, insomnia, and constant suspicion. I grinned by day and couldn't close my eyes at night. One evening I was heading home. A dark Chevrolet was parked at my entrance. Tinted windows, the car didn't move. I walked past, pretended not to notice, but my heart pounded so hard it seemed the whole neighborhood could hear. I went up to my place, looked out the window. The car sat for another hour, then drove off. From then on, I waited for it every evening. I started to realize my life had become a vicious circle. On one side, the FBI wanting to dismantle the Klan. On the other, the Klan that didn't forgive mistakes. I was trapped and saw no way out. In the criminal world, there's a rule. If it's too quiet around you, something's brewing. After that talk with the FBI, I felt the ground slipping away. Vinny stayed close, but his looks changed. Seemingly friendly, but with a hint of suspicion. And Carmine often stayed silent, just watching me at Klan dinners. I knew they sensed something. One evening I got a call. The voice was concise and icy. "Tomorrow, midnight, warehouse on the Queens waterfront." No explanations, no details. In our world, such invitations could mean anything, from a routine task to the final ride. I went. The old brick warehouse looked dead. Inside, dimness, smell of mold and metal. I entered and immediately noticed them. Vinny, Carmine, and three more veterans. Carmine sat at the table, twirling a glass of whiskey. His eyes were cold as the Arctic. "Vincenzo," he said, "we have questions for you." "Rumors reached us," Carmine continued. "The FBI's interested in you. They say they already know your name." I felt everything freeze inside, but my voice stayed even. "Rumors always circulate. I stay away from them." Vinny was silent, but his gaze pierced like a blade. Carmine stood, approached. "We want to make sure you're still ours." They brought in a guy, young, about 20, shaking like a leaf. I didn't know him. "This kid was with us, but seems he decided to talk too much," Carmine said. "If you're with us, Vincenzo, prove it." I realized what was happening. They wanted me to do something with no way back. It was a test. My head buzzed, heart pounded so hard it drowned everything. I looked at Vinny. His face was stone, but in his eyes I caught something. Maybe regret, maybe a signal. I approached the guy. He mumbled something, prayed, eyes full of horror. In that moment I realized, if I do this, I'll never escape this world. Never. But if I don't, it's the end for me. I closed my eyes and made a decision. When it was over, Carmine grinned and patted my shoulder. "Good job, Vincenzo. You're still ours." But inside I felt emptiness. It wasn't triumph, it was a trap. Now I was bound to them tighter than before. Questions from Reddit. Did you ever regret that episode? Every day, that evening I realized I'd lost part of myself. I made a choice, and it changed my life forever. Could you have refused? No, in our world, refusal is a verdict. I got home at dawn, sat on the bed, stared in the mirror. The reflection was the same guy in a suit and fancy watch, but inside I was different. For the first time ever, I felt, I don't own my life, I'm a prisoner. And that's when the idea of escape first sparked in me. After that night at the warehouse, I started having dreams. Like black and white frames, empty streets, shadows of people I'd never see again, and the rumble of cars outside the window. I'd wake in a cold sweat and stare at the phone. What if a call? What if another warehouse invitation? Living like that was unbearable. I realized, if I don't leave now, I'll be stuck forever. A week after the test, I got a strange note. It was under the door, just one word, soon. No signature, but I guessed from whom. In the evening when I left the pub, a gray Crown Victoria pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, and I saw that same agent in the coat. "You have little time," he said. "You know what's waiting for you. Cooperate and maybe you'll get out alive." I stayed silent, but this time inside there was no rage, just the thought, what if? I met Vinny at his favorite cafe. We sat by the window, sipping coffee. He looked out at the street, I at him. "You've changed, Vince," he said finally. "I see it, you become thoughtful." I grinned. "Getting old, I guess." He was silent for a long time, then added, "In our world, they don't let you get old. Remember that." His words were like a signal. I realized, he senses I'm thinking about escape. I started gathering info. Money, papers, connections, all quietly, carefully. I knew the slightest slip, and they'd find me before I take the first step. I opened a secret account, rented an apartment on the other side of town, didn't tell anyone. At night, I'd sit in the kitchen with a map, trace routes, think how to leave unnoticed. Questions from Reddit. Why didn't you immediately agree to cooperate with the FBI? Because it's no game. You can't just sign a paper and vanish. It means living under a new name, without family, without history. It means your life will never be the same. Did you think the Klan would find out? I thought about it every day. I lived like I had a shadow behind me. One night, I finally went to meet the agents. We sat in a car by a dark park. "You understand that if we start, there's no going back?" the agent asked. "I understand," I said, "but I have conditions." I won't say what exactly we agreed on, even now. But then, for the first time, I felt there might be a chance. A few days later, Carmine called me to him. "Vincenzo," he said, "we have too many leaks, too much chatter. You know what that can lead to." I nodded. His gaze was heavy, but he said nothing more. "Just let me go." I realized, he's not sure yet, but he senses something. We met on the roof of an old building, looked at the city lights. "Tell me honestly, Vince," he said, "you're planning something." I stayed silent. He sighed. "I won't rat you out, but you know this will end badly." I looked at him. "Maybe, but I'm exhausted." We stood in silence. That was probably our last honest talk. I packed my stuff, money, papers, clothes, everything I could carry. Left at night. The city slept, but it felt like eyes behind every corner. I got in the car and drove. Familiar streets flashed by outside. The pub where I hung with Vinny, the place where we met with Carmen, all left behind. Ahead, the unknown, but I was ready. Questions from Reddit. Were you scared in that moment? Scared to death? It was fear not of death, but that everything could fall apart. That they'd find me before I could leave. Did you think about what you'd do after escaping? Honestly, I didn't know. I just wanted to breathe. Wanted to wake up in the morning without fear. I remembered every detail of that night. The street was empty, only lanterns softly lit the wet asphalt. Heart pounded so hard it seemed the whole city could hear. I checked papers, money, bag, everything ready. Every action thought out, every turn planned. I got in the car and started the engine. Midnight on the clock, ahead the unknown. I drove past pubs and places where we met with Vinny and Carmine. Everything looked usual, but for me, it was a farewell lap. I didn't stop, didn't look back. This was my moment. The first days after escape were like a dream. I changed hotels, routes stayed invisible. Every phone ring made me freeze. But gradually, freedom set in. I could breathe deeply. I could walk streets without expecting someone around the corner. I settled in a small town in Wyoming. House with a garden, dog, work that brings peace. No one knows who I am. Sometimes I remember the past. Sometimes I hear familiar names in the news or local chatter. But I know that's a different life now. Questions from Reddit. Did you ever return to your old life? No, I look back and realize that's not my path. My life there ended. Do you fear they'll find you? Sometimes, but I know. If I'm careful and don't get into trouble, the chance is near zero. What did you learn? That freedom is the most valuable thing, and sometimes you need to lose everything to realize it. I'm writing this to share experience. Not for fame, not for heroism, just so someone understands. Even in a world with no laws and no protection, you can find a way out. My life now is peaceful. I plant vegetables, walk the dog, sip coffee, and smile. But I'll never forget those streets, those people, and those nights that shaped me into who I am. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear familiar footsteps on the wet cobblestones of New Jersey.